Hi everyone. In this video, I want to show you how to upgrade Omeka Classic using an FTP client. In a previous video, I showed how to do this using the command line, but it occurs to me that that can be a little intimidating and it's really easy to mess up. So I thought I would do a video showing how to do the upgrade using an FTP client, which is essentially something that allows for us to use a graphical user interface or a GUI. I also have found that as I've learned more about Linux and various systems, using the GUI is really helpful in kind of allowing for me to visualize how everything works. I think using GUIs was an important step or an important part in learning how to administrate a server. The first thing we need to do is log into our Omeka admin module, and you'll see that we're ready for an upgrade. I'm going to go to the Omeka website, Omeka Classic, user manual, upgrading, and we have a list of instructions here, which I went through with the command line version, and we'll do the same for the FTP client version. So the first thing they're telling us to do is always back up your database and if something goes wrong. This is actually easier to do with the command line. I suppose most of the stuff that is here became easier to do in the command line. Once you're used to it, it's really much more efficient and more effective. But if we're using the FTP client, backing up the Omeka database is a little different, and we need a tool that's called PHP MyAdmin. So the one time that we're going to have to log in and use the command line is now, so we can install our PHP MyAdmin. I'm using a test server, and I get to it through the IP address. Using PuTTY, and okay, so anytime we're installing new software, it's always a good idea to do sudo apt-get upgrade or update. I'm also going to run the upgrade just in case. Okay, so now I'm going to run this command, sudo apt-get install php myadmin, and yes. And so we get this screen that's asking us to choose what web server should be configured. In my case, I'm running Apache 2, and you'll see that the default is kind of there, but you do need to make sure you hit the space bar, so you see the little asterisk. That means it's selected, and we can now hit the enter button. So after a few seconds, we'll get this configuring PHP MyAdmin page. So the PHP MyAdmin package must have a database installed. So what we need to do is create a database in MySQL for PHP MyAdmin. And what this is telling us is it will do it for us. So in my case, I haven't already built a database for this, so I'm not going to go through the advanced database administrator steps to do that. I'm just going to have PHP MyAdmin configure that for me. So all I need to do is hit enter so that yes is executed. Please provide the password for the administrative account with which this package should be. Okay, so what they're asking for here is the root user's password for MySQL. So hopefully you have that set up, and hopefully you know what that is. And so the next screen, please provide a password for PHP MyAdmin to register with the database server. So this installation is going to create a MySQL user called MyPHPAdmin. And what this is doing is asking us for a password for that user. So I'm just putting in my default test server passwords. Okay, now we should be set up. If we go back to our admin page, and if we now put in PHP MyAdmin, we get the welcome page. And so the user that we just created was PHP MyAdmin, but that is specifically for the PHP MyAdmin tables. I like to use root user, and that's probably not the best practice, but I don't use PHP MyAdmin on production servers anyway. And in the past, when I have used them, I've always deleted it after using it just because it's a security risk, and I'm not really that great with security, so rather than risk being attacked, I just deleted it. So you could log in with PHP MyAdmin using that password that you just set up, or you could log in as root and enter our password. Okay, so this is a really nifty tool, and we won't get into a lot of details. We'll only really look at what we're after. But here you can see the various databases that are set up. So PHP MyAdmin is there. We can look at the various users on this server, so you'll see that we have a number of users. We can see our Omeka user, our PHP MyAdmin. Neither of these have all privileges. That's why I like to choose root, just so I avoid any permissions problems. So I'm going to select the Omeka database, and this is how we're going to back up our MySQL Omeka database. Click on that, and you'll see all of our tables here. You can go in and actually edit things. Again, this is a really powerful tool. You can look at the various columns that are involved with each table. It's really helpful for kind of giving what the structure of a database looks like. I'm just going to go back and click on the Omeka database here, and that includes all of our tables. And if we go to export, we can just keep the quick display, only the minimal options. The format is SQL. We'll click go, and then we get this download here. So once this is done downloading, we'll find it in our downloads folder. I'm just going to keep it there for the time being. We'll go back to our instructions. So next they're telling us we should deactivate our plugins. I'm going to go back to my server. Just going to delete all of this and go back to the admin module. And so they've asked us to deactivate our plugins. I'm going to go ahead and deactivate everything I have installed. And we go back to the instructions. Those have all been deactivated. Okay, move your old Omeka installation out of the way. So now what we're going to do is log into our FTP client. I'm using Filezilla, and the reason for that is for those of you who are using something other than Windows, this is kind of a universal FTP client. It works on Linux, it works on Mac, it works on Windows. Another option if you're a Windows user is WinSkip, which I primarily use, but like I said, I wanted to make sure I'm using something that's a little more universal. So what we need to do, if you don't have Filezilla installed, there are plenty of videos on YouTube and tutorials on the web that will show you how to do that. It's a pretty straightforward process as long as you have admin privileges on your computer. So what we want to do is log in to our server, and again I'm using the IP address because this is a test environment that I've built. I think it's a good idea to use test environments as you're learning things, or before you do a big upgrade. That way you can discover any quirks that may cause problems. So I'm going to log in here with my admin username and password. Here, most likely the port is 22, unless you set things up differently in Apache. It should be port 22. We'll click Quick Connect, and you'll see here on the right side of the screen, we are in our Omeka server. The left side of the screen here shows all of my files on my client, on my desktop, my computer. So I'm just going to go back. Oops. Let's see. I want to go to the root directory. I'm going to come down here to var. I'm going to go into www. And if we go into HTML here, you'll see all of our Omeka files. And what I'm going to do is over here on my client side, I am currently in C users and then my user account. And what I'm going to do, let's see, users, there I am. And so in this directory, I just want to create a new directory. I'm going to call it Omeka Backup. I'm going to click OK. And so now down here I should have my Omeka Backup. And what I'm going to do actually while I'm thinking of it is I am going to move my omeka.sql file, so my MySQL backup, into this new folder that I've created. And so I'm going to do that. I'm just going to minimize that a little, and let's see, minimize that a little, this over. And so I'm just going to take this download here and drop it right into here. So now I have my backup file sitting in this directory. In addition to that, I am going to move everything in HTML, which is the directory that holds all of my files for Omeka, so the var www HTML folder. I'm just going to move that all into backups. And one of the reasons why I like the command line better is this process is much quicker. So what I'm going to do is let this run for a few minutes and then come back when everything has been transferred. Okay, so my transfer has finished. If we look in the folder, we'll see that we now have all of our Omeka directories and files stored here in this safe area. So this is now stored on my client, on my desktop, well, on my C drive of the computer that I'm using, rather than being kept on the server. So now we're going to go back to the upgrade instructions, and so now next they want us to download and unzip the latest version of Omeka. So we can do that just by going to the Omeka homepage, and I'm just going to do that. And we want to download the latest version. I'll click on that, get Omeka Classic. And so our files are being downloaded. And now we can put this on our server. So we'll go back to the FTP client. And then what I like to do is we have all of these old files in here. So now what I'm going to do is go up to the HTML directory. I'm going to right click on it, and I am going to click delete. Yes, we want to delete this directory with its contents from the server. So we have done that. You'll see here that there's an error, that there was a permission error, that we cannot delete the HTML file, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Everything inside of it is now gone. You'll see we did have permissions for that. Hopefully you don't run into permission errors, because that can get a little bit tricky. Essentially what you want to do is make sure that if we look at, let's go ahead and clear this. And so what I want to do is just change directories to var www, and we will use the ls-l command. And what this will do is list all of our directories and files in the www directory. You can see that all we have is HTML, and you'll see that it is owned by the user libadmin, and anybody that's within the group libadmin will have some privileges. So if it's the user libadmin, you'll see over here we have read, write, and execute permissions. If they're in the libadmin group, they have the execute and read permissions. And if you are logged into your FTP client with something other than, well, in my case, if I'm not logged in as libadmin, I'm going to get a lot of permission errors. So if you're running into those problems, it's a good idea to look for other videos and tutorials on setting permissions within Linux. The Omeka page has some recommendations on that. You'll see that they have under installing setting directory permissions. So you may want to have a look at that if you're running into problems. If not, we can continue with our installation, and we'll go back to our instructions for upgrading. And so we have downloaded the Omeka zip file, and what I'm going to do is just open up the downloads folder and kind of set that off to the side. And just from within the downloads folder, I'm going to go ahead and unzip everything. So I use 7-zip. I'm going to just run extract here. Okay, so after a few minutes I have my extracted Omeka files. I'm going to open up the FTP client again, and what I'm going to do is go into the HTML directory, which we just emptied the contents of. I'm going to go into the Omeka folder from my downloads directory, and I'll click on admin once, come down here, press shift, and click again so that everything is highlighted. And what I'm going to do is just left click and hold, and that will bring all of the contents of that folder into the HTML directory on my server. So after a minute or so, all of our files and directories related to our new Omeka installation are in the folder here, are in the HTML directory. And so we'll go back to our upgrade instructions on the Omeka homepage. So we've downloaded, we've unzipped, and we've put the latest version of Omeka into the directory where our previous install of Omeka was located. And we have our previous install of Omeka here on the client, stored safely away on my C drive. So what we're going to do now is move or copy the following files and directories from your old Omeka installation. And what they're telling us here is the most important ones. So the DBI ini, very important that we transfer that one. The files directory is another thing that's very important. After that, anything that you've made customizations to, so likely your themes and plugins, will need to be updated. Anything else that you've modified in the Omeka core files, in your case, if it's pretty unlikely that you went in and hacked the files, it's not best practice. I did have to do that in order to connect Omeka to our Amazon S3 file server. So I'm going to have to go ahead and do that. So I'll also do that in this, but it's likely you don't have to do that. So what we'll do is we'll open up the FTP client again. I'll just maximize that. So what they told us to do is replace our old files with the new files. So I'm just going to drag and drop that here in the box. We would like to overwrite it. And so they're asking if we want to overwrite. I'm just going to click always use this action. And I have overwritten all of the files in this files directory using the files from my old directory. And what we have in here are just our image files. So it's really important, if you're not connected to Amazon S3, that you check and make sure you have all of your files in here, all of your image files, JPEGs or PNGs or whatever you use. Just make sure that those are in here. Otherwise, they're not going to show up on your new installation. So the next thing I'm going to do is replace the new plugins directory with my old plugins directory, simply because I have plugins in there. So I've done that. Oops, actually, I just put the plugins folder in the plugins folder. So I'm just going to re-drag and drop that. I want to make sure I'm not highlighting any of these directories. So I'll drop that in there. Okay, so now when I look in here, I don't need this. And I have my CSV import, I have my Dublin Core extended. So those are the two that I've installed on my own that didn't come with the theme. Next, I am going to replace my themes directory. So I'll just drop that here. And we'll look in here, and I have seasons, and I can see that all of my customizations have been transferred, so that's good. I've done some things with the HT access file, so I'm going to transfer that over. And really what that is I have, we'll go back here. I have it. So my test environment is HTTP. Our regular environment is HTTPS. So in the HT access file, I've loaded all of this from our production server, so it was expecting to be HTTPS, and it caused problems with the CSS files loading. So I had to go into HT access and change some things. So I'm going to replace my old HT access, or replace the new HT access with the old HT access. I am also going to replace the DB ini. Put that there. And I think that covers it. So at this point, I should be able to go back to my admin module. If I hit refresh, technically it should ask me to relog in. Let's see if we go to dashboard. Nope, it didn't even ask me to relog in. So you'll see now that the newer version disclaimer up the top is no longer there. We can go to plugins. We can reactivate. Okay, and oh, I forgot, we should always check the version. So we do have the latest version, the 2.6.1. We can get system information, so we have all of our stuff here. Um, Now I want to make sure if I go back to the site itself that my files are still there. Those items. Oh, that's right. I forgot. So all of my pictures are missing, and the reason for that is, as I had mentioned earlier, I had to go into the application file to change things so that I set things up with Amazon S3. And that is done under the application directory, under the config directory. There's this file called config.ini. And what I'm going to do is just replace my old config.ini, or replace the new one with the old one. So now if I go back here, everything should be the way it used to be. And it is. So we have all of our pictures back. And it looks like we're in good shape. So that is how you upgrade your Omeka installation using the FTP client. I hope this was helpful. I do look at comments. If you post any comments with questions, I'm happy to try to answer them as best I can. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in another video.